Hello, I had set up two security cameras back in 2019 to capture the analemma of the sun. One of them obviously facing south, and the other one I wanted to face towards Polaris so that I could capture the Earth's sidereal day. And there's a little bit of history behind those. I'll just link to some other videos so that you can go and watch those. But I tried to find new and different things to do with the images that were captured. And I made a few other videos on that as well, such as being able to obviously identify the sun, that night a specific star occupying the same point in the sky, I was able to figure out which star that was. So I'll link to that video as well. So the first year that I had this set up, I was trying to figure out what I could do with the images that were captured and to see how I could turn it into multiple different projects. And as the 1 year anniversary of the project was approaching, I still didn't quite have an idea of what to do with those images until I had a really interesting thought, and that thought is really what propelled my entire skywatching app and all of the various projects that have spawned from it. It took a little while to get around to it, and it took a little bit of planning, but I think I have achieved a reasonable amount of success to match that original idea that I had. And so that's what this video is going to be about today. Before I discuss what that idea was, I need to talk about a few of the challenges that I had along the way. One of them is that the cameras that I use are extremely low grade, ultra budget, bargain basement kind of security cameras. There are no specs for the optics, and I'm just guessing at the level of barrel distortion. And if I were to do this properly, I'd have to take the cameras down and bring them into a controlled environment so that I could get the cameras to record a grid pattern so that I could then identify the barrel distortion and what would be needed to correct the distortion to make it appear as if it was a rectilinear lens. And there are a couple of other factors. I think that the plastic that holds the lenses in place got a little bit soft over the years and has become much blurrier over time. So the optical characteristics of the cameras have changed. The north-facing camera in particular has been bumped repeatedly when I was clearing the snow or resealing the deck. So the camera position has changed at the very least multiple times. There's a lot of factors involved that make it really hard to quantify exactly where the camera is pointing in the sky. I know that the camera has barrel distortion, which makes it a little bit harder to align everything. As you can see, the moon is here in the image when it should really be more over here. If I scroll over throughout the day, for example, you can see that as it approaches the middle of the image, it lines up more as I would expect. And then as it takes off again, the moon captured by the camera tends to linger a little bit. And Arcturus is another example. You can see that it was lined up over here, and as it goes more towards the edge, there's more of a discrepancy between where the camera captured it and where it should have been in the image. So that was one of my main roadblocks that was preventing me from implementing the idea that I had. Thanks to using ImageMagic's convert utility and the barrel distortion setting, I was able to experiment a little bit with correcting for barrel distortion, and I decided to make it a little bit easier by implementing the ABCD coefficients that are used by the barrel distortion filter in ImageMagick, with the hope and the goal of using these same numbers and plugging them into ImageMagick so that I could batch process a whole bunch of images. And there's a few problems related with that I'm not going to cover in this video. But The long and the short of it is that I was able to apply a barrel distortion correction filter, and it's still not perfect, but the setting that I currently have is a lot closer to where it should be throughout the image. And so I'm going to consider that a small victory, and now I can go ahead and advance this project idea forward. Looking at all of the various movement of the celestial objects in the sky, I discovered that if I set the camera's altitude to match my latitude, all of the objects will appear to move in a straight line across the image like this. Unfortunately, that's not the case because the camera mount has a series of teeth that mesh between the camera and its base, and so I can only put the camera in certain fixed positions, and the best that I could accomplish was 47 degrees. So the camera's altitude is just ever so slightly off of what it should be for my latitude, and that causes everything to appear to move in a slight arc like this. I have an as of yet improperly calibrated barrel distortion that I need to account for, which will ultimately affect my ability to calculate the altitude and azimuth of the camera. And the fact that the camera is not pointing directly at the celestial equator, giving it that slight arc, means that I have to overcome that as well. So if I could properly apply all of the required transformations to the various images that were captured, I should be able to capture all of the objects, be it the sun, the moon, the stars, or even the planets, to move in a straight line across the image like this. The idea that I had for the 1-year anniversary was to see if I could apply techniques that are used to create panoramic images so that I could create a 360-degree view of the celestial equator. So the idea would be to take an image like this, apply the barrel distortion correction, rotate it by the appropriate amount, and then to apply additional calculations. In fact, I would be doing the rotate and correction at the same time, so that with luck, all of the objects in the sky would appear to be moving horizontally without deviating up or down. So that was the goal, and I've achieved that more or less. And so this would be the result. If I could, I would be creating not a 16 by 9, but a 32 by 9 kind of panoramic view. So what I ended up doing instead was to split the 16 by 9 video into an upper half and a bottom half. The top half would represent the day. So this would represent local solar noon, and anything to the left all the way to the edge like this would be from local solar noon to towards the east, and then everything to the right would represent everything towards the west, and the bottom half would represent night, with the middle would represent local midnight, and this edge on the left would be connected to this edge on the right, and this edge on the bottom right would be connected to the upper left edge here. So that would represent a 360-degree view. So if I scroll back to this morning, the camera would be looking towards the southwest, and then as local solar noon approaches, it would be looking in this direction, and as the Earth rotates, the camera would appear to be looking more towards the east of the celestial equator until it wraps around and starts coming around over onto the night side until it reaches local midnight. The next part that I had to do was to implement some kind of algorithm that would stitch together all of the various images into a panoramic view. And at this point, it's going to be a little bit slow as I'm doing this because it's got a lot of calculations it has to do. And I didn't really optimize this for speed. as it progresses, you can see that the view of the camera shifts relative to the celestial sphere. And at this point, I haven't really stacked any of these images together. What I did was I found a section of sky that's visible from top to bottom. And so I'm using this leading edge of the image right here to stitch them together. So as time moves on and the camera slowly moves out of the way, what you're starting to see here is the combination of that leading edge of the images being combined to create that kind of view. At the very beginning, whenever I was setting this up, I thought I was going to try the entire image, and that turned out to be a real disaster. I'm not going to cover it here. I was experimenting with different amounts of the image that I should combine together, and the first video that I'm going to show includes a fairly wide area. So from about where the tree stops right around here to maybe about here, that is the area of the image that I was looking at between each frame to combine together into a combined background. I'm going to play that video now. And when I finally was able to render each individual image into a video like this, and I could see how the video progressed, I thought that it was a fairly half-decent first pass effort, but it still had a few problems. This, by the way, is an example of the mask that I use. So I create a PNG with a transparent layer, and I'm able to identify the areas of an image that I want to look at, or what parts of the image I want to ignore, like the great big tree that's in the middle of the image. And so I chose a strip right here that's just to the left of the tree. And because I had to rotate the camera slightly to capture the full analemma of the sun between summer and winter, there's a few times when I can only capture something as they're going behind these trees. And it's more noticeable in the winter than it is in the summer because there's leaves on the trees in the summer. But there's a spot right around here that's reasonably good at letting light through at times, and that gives me an extra view that I'm not able to capture because the camera was rotated, and in some cases the full moon might just pass underneath this point, but this still allows me to capture a glimpse of the moon over here. Or likewise in the winter, the sun starts right around here and passes along here, and I can definitely see the sun around the December solstice. So I've got these two patches in the image that I'm using to capture the detail. And when I chose this width, which is about 20 minutes of time, I got much better results. I could probably even narrow the window down even more to something like 10 minutes. But on occasion, the cameras went offline for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and that would leave a bit of a gap, and that could have been a bit of a problem. So I think overall, the width that I have here that I'm going to show in this video clip right about now is probably one of the better compromises. I think overall this captures the original intent that I had back in 2020. So I will consider this little project kind of complete. And so now I can move on to something else. This is really about half of the idea that I had back then. The north-facing camera has had quite a few other problems along the way. The main thing is that I'm only able to capture about 2 stars reasonably consistently, and that doesn't make for a very exciting video. So I think if I'm going to go ahead with that part of the project, I might have to kind of play around with a few things and substitute a few things along the way. So I'm going to have to think a little bit more about that before I try to do that one. But that's going to be it for this video. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, I really would appreciate the thumbs up, the subscribe if you're not, and all that other stuff. It helps the YouTube algorithm. And with that, I'm going to see you in another video, hopefully soon enough. So bye for now.